What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Shop Mini RC. I'm Ken, and today we've got another awesome project. We're working on this guy. This is the new Injora Nylon. I believe it's Nylon chassis. This is the little one that you see. A lot of people have already picked this thing up. Seems like it's doing real good and real popular in a lot of the Facebook groups. It's a real small, compact little chassis. You can stretch it out. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it. So we're going to go ahead and do a build on this guy. One of the cool things is you can just take a stock C10 and throw this chassis on there. Pretty cool. The rig we're going to use is already kind of in a semi-upgraded state, but we got these new axles. These are the extended +4 Injoras. They're the wider axle housings, plus a couple other Injora upgrades. We're going to try these shocks, the encased spring shocks, the closed shocks. We got a skid, some links, and a drive shaft. We're going to pull all the other stuff that we need out of this little buggy that we've got. It's an old RB1 buggy. Not our main one because we have a built one, but this one is a kind of another, basically it's a parts bin build. So we're going to turn it into this new Injora buggy chassis, and I am excited. So this is the RB1 we're going to convert over. We've already got our decased ESC. If you want to see a video on decasing your stock ESC, this is a V1. You can also do your V2. But on the V1, you can remove your switch, which I haven't done on the V2 yet, so it may be possible, but I'm not 100% sure. I know it's different, actually. The switch there is different. But being able to at least remove the power and the motor and do those as straight wires, unlike this one's not redone, but that'll help give you a much lower ESC. Anyway, check out the video over there on decasing your ESC. It's going to help a lot with this build because this chassis that we're putting all this stuff into is very tiny. And if you want to use the interior and keep it clean looking, you're going to have to definitely use small electronics or find a way to minimize the electronics that you do have. All right, so we're going to take this guy apart. We're going to pull off the stuff we want to use. We got the Trail Kings on here, and we've already got one of these. That's why we're taking this guy apart. Like I said, this is kind of a parts bin build. We've got a much more upgraded version. This one's also running the Trail Kings, OGRC servo, and stuff of that nature. Anyway, this guy's already set up, so we want to keep this one. We're going to pull this one apart and put it back in the parts bin, except for the stuff we need for this build. So let's get to it. All right, guys, so here's everything that comes with the Rock Buggy body shell chassis. It's a nylon parts chassis. The tube chassis is all nylon, which means it's very durable. It's got some flexibility. And it basically comes with everything you need for a chassis or body except for the skid plate. So you're going to need the skid plate, obviously. And then everything else it's got. You know, you can, like I said, you can take a completely stock C10 or JLU or Bronco and pull out the insides. Basically, get this and slap it right into the new buggy chassis. It's just like 8 screws, basically. Actually, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12. It's 12 screws to be able to pop this guy into this chassis exactly as it sits from a stock truck. Now, we're going to do some other stuff. We're going to, like I said, we're going to do new links. We're going to try these captured spring shocks. They're a little short. A lot of people like to do double barrels on these and want all kinds of crazy articulation. I want to try to not do crazy articulation. I want enough, right? But I want it to ride low. So we're going to run these shocks. We want to try to get our links to be straight across the belly plate. Maybe even a little bit of an angle so the belly plate's the lowest part. Ideally, you want them flat. We'll see. We'll see where we can adjust and we'll tune it from there. But we wanted to try those shocks. We have not used these internal spring shocks yet. So anyway, the chassis here, the whole thing only weighs 34 grams, which is crazy light. So that's awesome. Another cool thing is this chassis comes with an LED. Pretty sweet. It's all injection molded. It's all compatible with stock SCX24. It's a tube roll cage, all that good stuff. You don't need to use your stock rails, which are really actually pretty heavy, and they're sprung weight. You want to keep your sprung weight as low as possible, and then get all the heavy weight unsprung. You want it all on your axles and your wheels, ideally not rotating, but you get what I'm saying. You want all the weight as low and to the outside as possible. So chassis rails are not ideal. So this definitely lightens up all that, and it should just make even a stock rig perform excellent, excellent, excellent. So we've got our body panels here. They come in a bunch of different colors. You've got orange, blue, red, green, and then they even offer a clear in hindsight. Well, they offered the clear literally the day after we ordered these. So that kind of sucks. We would have gotten the clear, but I like the green. This green color is awesome. We don't have any rigs in this green color. I thought we could call this guy Kermit or something along those lines, give it a frog reference. We're going to be using this. Kind of clashes, actually. This green skid kind of clashes, but it'll be underneath, so not a big deal. And yeah, we're super excited for this guy. Let's go ahead and get into it. Like I said, we're going to use this donor rig and the new parts we got and get it all together. Now, I'm not going to show every part of this build. I know a lot of my builds are super in-depth, but this build, being an SCX24, being another tube chassis, it's going to be very similar to all my other builds. You can check out some of those builds if you really want to see it, but we will hit the highlights, and we are going to show how to assemble the chassis, or the body, however you want to look at it. And so we'll assemble all that, and you can watch that. You can use the chapters below to skip around if you want. I love that this guy comes with an interior. We've also got our battery straps and some Velcro, some 3M sticky Velcro for your ESC. We've got our cross braces, our side tube chassis, and this is the battery tray, or however you want to use it, the ESC tray. And then another, I think this is part of the front bumper hoop or tube frame hoop, and then all of our hardware. And yeah, our light. So Injora does have a instruction sheet you can check out. We'll go ahead and show it real quick. You can pause. So this little guy is one of the concerns I have. I want to be able to remove and re-add the interior so that we can put our battery and as much of the electronics as we can on the inside. I'd like to put the battery on the inside, maybe along one of the skids. We have a similar build on another rig that's very small and tight, and we like to hide everything on the interior, under the interior if we can. You'll be able to put the battery on the rear, but again, ideally, we kind of want to hide everything underneath and inside. So we'll see where we can get with that. We may have to trim this or shave this down a little so that we can get it in and out through the front window, but we'll see when we get there. Hopefully you'll be able to learn from our mistakes, because we're gonna try to do some stuff here. And yeah, so wait to build your whole rig until you've watched the whole video. Then you know kind of where we ended up. We're just gonna follow the instructions, build it as they show in the instructions, and then from there we can tweak things. Basically, they tell you to start with the interior and this cross member. Now remember, this bag's for the panels. The other bag with this hoop is for the chassis construction. It looks like all the screws are the same size, so you don't have to worry about which screw to use where. They're all 1.3s. This one here is an 1.4 by 6, and then these guys are 1.4 by 4s. And the first step shows using a 1.4 by 4, so that's what we're going to do. I thought the chassis was going to use all the same size screws, but it doesn't. So this one uses the 4mm screws, and it looks like the entire rest of the chassis, other than the panels, uses the 6s. So we can go ahead and throw this in. Make sure that this little tab is on the outside of your shock tower. And oddly enough, it even shows this guy here as a 6mm, and it pokes through. I don't know, if we have extra screws, we'll probably pop that out and use one of the shorter screws in there. This also might be a good spot to mount your shock, so you could end up mounting your shock there. We'll see when we get there. I'm just following the directions. Make sure when you put your roof on that you put the flat side. There's a kind of a side that has indents, and these sit lower. Put the flat side to the top. You also want to be very sure not to over tighten these guys. You're going into plastic, so you don't really have to worry about the screws backing out. So you just want to go in until they feel kind of snug. Over tightening them would be bad. You don't want to strip them out, because there's no real fixing. You use super glue, I guess, to fix it, something along those lines, down in the screw hole, but just don't over tighten in the first place and you should be good. So this is showing then to do the back. Looks like there's only 2 screws on each side for the back, so that's pretty simple. So just another thing I kind of wanted to point out, we're probably going to have a lot of newer people checking out this chassis build because it seems to be real popular as a first kind of major upgrade to your stock rig. You can also use an 0.50 inch, so 0.050 inch. If you feel like your 1.3 is kind of too big, then you might want to end up using an 0.50. Just because these are pretty tight screws, and depending on what kind of screwdriver or hex driver you have and the quality of it, it might be a tight fit, and then this guy will work in there as well. And conversely, if your 0.50 is too loose, make sure you use the 1.3. They are basically the same size, but an 0.50 is just ever so slightly smaller. And yeah, the MIP is a very tight fit in these. And we probably could use the 0.50. I mean, they're a pretty tight fit, but they do fit. You just got to kind of push them in. You know what? Actually, I'm going to switch over to the 050. I think it's a little bit easier. And yeah, it's not going to be so hard to put the screws in. Yeah, a little bit easier. We'll do that. Anyway, so we've got the one side done. We're going to go ahead and do the other side now. And you don't need to see that. We'll just do it up. Alrighty, we've got both sides installed, our interior installed, our battery tray or ESC tray installed. And when you first get this thing, you're going to feel like, man, this kind of feels kind of flimsy. It's nylon, right? But it's flexible and it's strong, which is great. But this does seem kind of flimsy until you start to put your screws in and you've got a full rigid cage. And then you're like, you're going to realize it's stiff. Like it's pretty stiff. And we don't even have the skid plate in yet. So just be aware that, you know, it is much more stiff than it might initially feel when you get these individual parts. Because again, they're nylon, so they are flexible, right? Like this part right here, pretty flexible. But once we get the rest installed, we get this little front piece on here, a little stinger, it's going to stiffen it up even more. And I can tell you already, this stuff up here, I mean, this is stiff, super stiff, right? I almost wonder if we're going to end up trimming this tray here for more clearance on the inside. Again, we'll see once we get it all together. I want to show you what you get when you buy the chassis. We got our front hoop on, and yeah, like I said, it stiffens it up quite a bit. So that's pretty awesome. Now we're just going to do our light bar and our panels, and that's pretty simple. You don't need to watch me do that, so let's throw that on. Remember, all the panels are going to be using these smaller screws, and actually the light bar uses these larger screws. And it looks like we're going to have plenty of extras, so maybe we'll swap some of these longer screws to the 4mm. One thing to be aware of when you're installing your light bar, there's little tabs. So make sure you're facing the right direction so that your light bar is straight and you're not, you know, bending these out too hard because your tab's wrong. If you try to install it upside down, it's going to kind of sit goofy. So definitely install with your tabs in the correct direction. And I would recommend putting your wire through the inside and going on the wire side first, and then you can kind of tuck it in on this side as well. Now if you're having issues getting it in there, don't force it. You don't want to break it. You can loosen this screw here and this screw here, and that'll get you in there much, much easier. And actually, I'm going to count these out real quick. So there's 16 screws in all of our panels, and that gives us quite a few extras. So I'm going to use these short ones in the light bar actually. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I don't want the screw going too deep into the light bar housing and shorting it out. I'm sure it's fine, but that's just something I've learned through Mini Z and whatnot, is when you're screwing next to electronics, you want to use the shortest screw possible to hold in that part, because if you have a long screw and you go into any of the boards or touch the wires or anything like that, you're going to regret it. So we're using the shortest possible screw that came with our kit. Alright, we'll clean up this wiring when we get everything together. For now, it'll stay as it is. Alright, let's do our panels.
A few moments later.
Alrighty, we got our Kermit the Cage or Frog or whatever we want to call this thing done. This is basically what you're going to get. Look at all the extra screws you guys get. Oh, you know what? We just realized that the light bar came with these two screws. They were sitting off to the side because they were separate. Totally spaced that out. The instructions don't mention it. And look, they are even shorter. Even shorter. Oh, not by much, actually. Actually, they're not. They're the same size. Alright, well that's good. So, those guys are the same size. Yeah, though, this thing is awesome looking. I love the way it looks. It is tiny. I don't know if we're going to be able to pull our interior in and out to swap batteries. We may have to use the rear tray for batteries. We were hoping to be able to use a small battery on the side here, and then just pop our battery in and out. Maybe we'll be able to figure something out once it's all together. But yeah, this is easy to put together. Super quick, other than, you know, just all the screws, but it really doesn't take that long. And yeah, it looks good. I love the color of the green. Really kind of pops. It's going to be a sweet looking rig. Let's move on to the next. Yeah, we're going to put our belly plate in and start building that stuff up, see what we can do. All right, so before we start actually putting everything together, I wanted to show you, this is a stock C10, right? And we removed the servo and the ESC has been unplugged. But essentially, it is a stock C10 or Bronco or JLU. And all you have to do, like I said earlier, is remove 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 on the other side, so 8 plus the 4 shocks. So just 12 screws. And you can literally take your built chassis and plop it on there. Put your 8 screws back into your chassis and skid plate. Just trying to get her lined up. There you go. And then you put your 4 shocks back in. And you'll essentially get that. You'll be sitting a little higher because your shocks, but basically that. Stock C10 JLU or Bronco into this little badass little buggy. Pretty sweet. So I just wanted to show you how easy that is. Again, 12 screws. 12 screws. And as we showed earlier, we've got our donor. It's just basically C10 but with some upgrade stuff. Plus we're going to use the upgrade parts we purchased. And we're going to throw them on here. Probably going to use these wheels and tires. But look at that. How sweet is that? We're going to try to get it as low as possible without sacrificing articulation. And yeah, it's going to be pretty sweet. So let us start to get this apart. We'll put it back together. We'll update you along the way. Check it out, guys. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the transmission and motor out of the stock skid. And we're going to throw it into the new green skid we've got. This guy here. It's the Injora green skid. And if you've never done this before, it's super simple. It's literally just 3 screws, 2 on the bottom, 1 on the inside. 1, 2, and 1 right here. 3. Ta-da! So we're going to pull our drive shafts out because we do have a new Injora metal drive shaft. Look at that guy. New silver one. It's not really chrome. It's kind of a aluminum looking, sort of. Oh, you know what? These are still hexes. Some of the drive shafts use Phillips heads. Some use hexes. I prefer the ones that use the hexes. That way I don't have to change tools. So I like that. So these guys look pretty quality. Pretty smooth on the shaft itself. You can see they're, I don't know what you call that. They're splined, essentially. They're a little bit rough. Nah, not too bad, actually. And they'll just get better over time. I think part of it is this is a sharp cut kind of on the end here. So that's probably what's happening is it's kind of rubbing on the inside a little. You can kind of hear it. But it's not too bad. Not too bad. The joints look really strong. They're pretty good sized pins. All metal, so that's what we like about it. They do not have the D cutouts. You know, because stock one kind of has the D cutout. They're full circular cutouts. So just so you know. Also, something of note when you're installing drive shafts, just again for the new guys out there, you want to put the female end, the open end, on the transmission side. And the idea behind that is, and especially on larger rigs, that your drive shaft's generally going to be facing downward. And that means that you're less likely to get dirt and grime stuck in there. If you're like this, you can get dirt and grime into the drive shaft. So if you put this on your lower side, you know, you can get dirt in there. So that's the idea. That's why you'll almost always see the female side of the drive shaft on the transmission or the upper part of the rig, and then your axle side is going to be the male side. And make sure you phase them. Phasing your drive shaft means having the ears of the drive shaft. Interestingly enough, these Injoras are just slightly off, but generally the ears here are going to be totally in line, right? You don't want them like this, because then this will be turning differently than this, and at high speeds you can get vibration. Interestingly, these don't totally line up. The stock guys definitely do. We've phased them and they always line up. But for some reason, these guys are just barely off, which shouldn't be a big deal. You just want it to be as close to a line as possible. If you seem way off, kind of like that seems way off, just turn it all the way until you kind of get it in line. That's pretty close. They're not perfect, but it's pretty close. It looks like these guys fit fairly snug onto the output shaft. This side has like no play. Any sort of play is on the shaft itself. I can see down in there. It's the shaft moving, not the connection. This side's got a little bit more play. You can kind of see it just a little bit here. And that is the connection on the shaft. So this one's not quite as snug as this side. I don't know why there's a tolerance difference. I'm not sure if it's the drive shaft or if it's the actual output shaft on the transmission. Either way, that is so minimal, it's irrelevant. I almost didn't want to point it out, but I wanted to show you how tight they were, because this side is super tight, which is awesome, but this side just a little bit. But I've seen drive shafts with way more play in them, and they work just fine. Again, the only thing is at super high speeds, you might get some vibration, but generally it's not a big deal. If you didn't notice, the motor that we're running here, hopefully it'll fit in there just fine, but it's the Hot Racing 66 turn, and yeah, should be good. It's got the Hot Racing motor plate. We should have no issue with it fitting in here. Yeah, fits just fine. So we'll go ahead and just get our side screws into our skid, and then we'll do up our links. We're going to do the links from this side. And we're on to our links. I really like these Injora links with the rod ends. They're a little bit cheaper than the one-piece links. And one of the things we've used these for is when we have like a hybrid build where we're using SCX and FCX or TRX and FCX, whatever, different axles, and we need different hardware or pivot balls, we can use different rod ends on these links or use these rod ends on custom length links. And I have a video about that. We'll put that right over here. You can check that out, where we're basically taking and making custom link rod ends. But we use these Injora rod ends because at least the times we've ordered it, they come with 18 rod ends. And generally, when you buy the individual rod ends, they're like $1 a piece. And so for the price, you essentially are getting 18 instead of 16 rod ends for the same price. You basically get them for like 90 cents a piece or 95 cents or something like that. They're just slightly cheaper. And they come with all the hardware and everything you need. So we like that. So basically for the same price as just the rod ends, like on Amazon, you can get the rod ends and the screws and the actual links, and then just use the rod ends for custom stuff, or use the links and just have extra parts. And it's basically the same price. So the best way to kind of do this is you can either just press down on them and that'll push the ball in, or you can use some needle-nose pliers and just kind of gently push them in. And just make sure you don't mar up the plastic rod end or the ball joints. And you want to make sure these things move nice and smooth. A cool little thing that they also include in these links is this little nut of sorts. It's essentially a double-threaded inner piece, I guess. It's like a little brass piece where the inside's threaded, and you are able to screw in for 4-link. That way, if your servo tray doesn't have threaded ears, where you want to thread in your 4-link, this will let you put it between that where your normal Y-link goes, and then you can screw into this. That way, not just the ears are holding it. So like on a tray like this, if we're not threaded here, which we're not threaded on this side, only on this side, it's meant for a single screw to go through and hold your Y-link. This will go in between there, and you can screw into that, and you can do your 4-link. Pretty sweet that Injora includes that. So again, another reason we like to buy these kits like this. It's just a good value. And one last little point, they're semi-adjustable, right? Like if you needed to have just a little bit extra length, you could unthread them. You'll have a space in there, which you could use like not an O-ring necessarily, but like a plastic spacer or even a metal spacer if you can find something the same diameter. And that'll give you the ability to adjust your length just a little bit. And you're not going to want to do too much because there's only so much threading and you don't want to weaken this. But if you do maybe a little less than that, but you do a little bit like that and a little bit like that on this side, you're actually going to get a few millimeters of extra length. So if you need to adjust, or you want to adjust like your clocking on your axle, you can do it with these kind of links. The one-piece links are set one piece, right? There's no adjusting it. So you can kind of do something along those lines, and you just get another millimeter, 2 millimeters, maybe even 3 out of that. And again, like I said, the only problem is you have a space, but you could always fill that gap with some antenna tube, right? So like the tubing that you use on an RC antenna, you can buy that stuff super cheap, and we've actually made our custom links using threaded rod and antenna tube. We also showed that in that video. Again, for the new guys out there, I just wanted to point it out. On these link ends, there's one side that's slightly chamfered, and another side, generally, there's one side that's slightly chamfered or more open, and one side a little bit more closed. This is the side you want to put your pivot ball in. If you try to come in through the other side, you're going to have a heck of a time, and it's probably not going to go in very well. So just be aware that the side does matter. So I'm kind of spending a lot more time on links than I intended, but something I wanted to show you about these plastic link ends. Sometimes they can be kind of tight, right? So when you put a link together, you can see it doesn't really want to drop easily. This one's not too bad, actually. Let's try this side. And it just depends on manufacturing tolerances and stuff. Actually, this one's not too bad either. This one is a little tight. Unfortunately, we don't have a link in there yet, but you can see it kind of grabs or is sticking. You know, there's a little bit of binding there. A way to fix this, and you've got to be careful doing this, but we do it on the Minis all the time, is you can grab some needle nose pliers, or any pliers really, and you want to just kind of pinch right here. You don't want to do it too hard, but you just kind of squeeze them together, and what it's doing is it's slightly deforming the plastic. Oh, look at that. That's a huge difference, actually. You can almost see it. Look at that. I'm just barely touching it, and it moves a ton now. Okay? Look at this side. Let's see. This side, it won't move. You can even hear me doing it. Right? It seems fine like this, but it does bind a little bit. Okay? So if we take this and we just squeeze it, make sure you're centered. Make sure you're not squeezing so hard that it slips and it breaks the plastic or mars it up, but just evenly kind of squeeze it. Sometimes you got to go hard. It depends on the kind of plastic it's made out of. And make sure your ball doesn't shoot out. You don't want to squeeze it so hard it kind of shoots out. And now look. Way more loose. Okay? So that's what you want. All right, so we got all of our links built. This one only came with one extra link end, which is fine, but we got an extra ball end. Either way, the extra stuff is always nice. So yeah, Injora always seems to throw in a little bit of extra hardware here and there, which is fantastic. More manufacturers should take notice. If you don't throw in an extra screw, an extra link end, an extra ball joint, just little extra pieces, just one even, O-rings, stuff like that, then you're doing it wrong, because you're also saving yourself customer service headaches, because what if your manufacturing process has a broken one or a missing one, you know, or even user error, they break one, you know, at least they've got extras, at least of the small hardware. I wouldn't expect extra links or anything crazy like that, but link ends, ball joints, screws, you know, O-rings, washers, little hardware stuff. Definitely include extras. So we're gonna go ahead and get this stuff installed on here, and we'll be back. One more thing, make sure you kind of clean up any sort of flashing that might be on your link ends. This one had a little bit. You just want to kind of clean that off if it happens to be there. You know, no manufacturing is perfect. You just want to make sure that when you put your link into wherever it's being held, right, that the flashing's not catching and causing binding. You want things to be as loose as possible. Not so loose that it's like flopping around and there's a ton of play, but I mean loose as in no binding. Nothing's catching, nothing's stopping it from moving freely. We went through and we pinched all of our link ends so that all of our pivot balls are super smooth. That's going to help a ton with articulation. So we've ran into a small issue. These are all the screws that came with our skid plate. These are the longest screws, and we're trying to screw into our link here. And this screw, I think this chassis right here is a little bit wider than the normal chassis rail, right? The skid plate or the side skid. And so when you put your screw in, you stop like right there, and they're not long enough. You need like an extra millimeter or two to get in there using this chassis. So that's kind of unfortunate. Like I said, you can go all the way in, but you can see I just pushed it all the way in and it will not screw any further. And you might not be able to see here, but that is the floor of this skid plate here, or the side skid. It's not like it goes in any deeper. And we tried pushing real hard to see if we could get any kind of grab on there, and you can't. Like it's just barely too short. You can just push this guy back out. So that is really unfortunate. Maybe the chassis should come with 4 longer screws to make up for that, but you definitely aren't going to be able to use your stock screws, and you're not going to be able to use the screws that come with the skid plate, so you'll have to get some extras. So these guys that come with the skid plate are M1.4 by 10s, and you need M1.4 by 12s to be able to fit through So just that extra 2mm will get you there. It's really unfortunate that this chassis doesn't come with screws that will fit there. Maybe Injora can update their packages. So luckily we have a screw kit, and they have the M12 or M1.4x12s. These are the ones that came with our skid plate, and they're the 10s. So 10mm, 12mm, and the 12 is exactly what you need to be able to fit it into the through the chassis essentially and into the skid plate. And we're able to thread in now. So that's unfortunate. I definitely think Injora should be including the 12mm screws to help with that build. Because if you're trying to convert a stock over and you don't have a screw kit, and heck, even buying their skid plate, you don't get the correct length screws. So unfortunate. I've seen a bunch of these builds, and not a single person that I've seen has mentioned that. So it's kind of surprising, actually. The kit, if I recall, earlier on in the video, only came with some 6s and some 4s, basically to assemble the chassis itself. So we poked around a little bit, checked out some of the groups, and reached out to some of the guys that we knew had already built one of these chassis. And most of them came back and said they don't remember. They use their own hardware kits and stuff like that. So those guys have built before, and they probably didn't think twice about this issue. But Richard Goff mentioned, hey, I was trying to build it using what I had on a stock rig, and then upgrade it later, and I had the same issue. I couldn't use my stock bolts. So his fix, so if you're a newer builder and you don't have a bunch of hardware sitting around, is he took his 10mm bolt that came out of here and he put it in this way. So basically screwed it in this way, and that will give you all this threading to hold the bolt in, and then also it'll get you into this area right about here. You won't come all the way through the skid, but you will be into the skid, so that'll help. And you've got these 2 screws in here to hold the skid or the side skid onto the skid plate, so that should be more than enough. If you do have a hardware kit though, I would recommend using a 12mm through here. But if not, you can run the stock 12 or the one that came with your skid plate this way, and it'll come to about right there. Now mind you, none of this is threaded. Here and here is not threaded at all. The only threading is there, so maybe use some Loctite if you do, but it's plenty and it'll hold just fine. You don't have to worry about any of that. The chassis is held just fine to the skid using these 2 bolts. All right guys, so we got all of our links in. Just want to show you how floppy they are. Look at that, it's like a squid, right? Nothing's binding. That's what you want your links to look like, nice and floppy. Okay. Oh wait, is this one stuck? Oh no, we're good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and work on getting our axles attached. All right, we got a servo mounted up on our axle. We're using an Eco 827. And then we've also got our brass diff cover here. We're just putting one on the front. We're not going to do one on the back. We're trying to get that front weight bias a little bit. We've got an OGRC servo tray here. This is just one of the basics. It's not an adjustable. And then on the back, we're going to run this guy, the OGRC link riser. And it's wide, so it sets your links a little bit wider, which will help with your side hilling. It gives you more stability on the sides. So we're going to try this guy out. We're going to go ahead and just mount these guys in the bottom middle row on the rear truss, and then we can always adjust it later, right? This link set being adjustable will allow us to, clock our axle forward and backwards a little bit by moving it, forward and backwards on the holes, and then also you can get anti-squat, more anti-squat by scooting the link higher. The lower your link, the more squat you'll get. The higher the link, the less squat you'll get. Looks like we're kind of bottoming out right now on our motor. So that's unfortunate. Our link is hitting our motor. So we might have to do something about that. Not quite sure yet. And looking at this already, I can tell we need to move our link back a little bit more on the truss to get our axle to cant outward or clock outward just a little bit. You can see our drive shaft is kind of pointing down compared to, our lower drive shaft compared to the upper drive shaft. So we want to rotate the axle basically from the counterclockwise just a little bit from this view. So we'll go ahead and do that because we can tell it already needs it. So we'll move these guys forward. Now you can see our drive shaft sits a little bit better, right? Because it pushed our axle counterclockwise. So that's good. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of this right here. That sucks. We'll have to try to figure out. Maybe we can grind down on our motor case a little bit or grind down on this link just a little bit just to get a little bit more even. You can see we have tons of articulation this way, but that's kind of our max on this side. So that's what we get for running a rear-facing motor, and a long one at that. There's also the option of making like a custom link or using a high clearance link on the inside that kind of is bent the other way. Not that that's ideal, but you know, if it works, it works. So there's a lot of different options we can do here. Let's go ahead and move on. We'll get our front on and we will be back.
More moments later.
She's a beaut. This is awesome. Nice and floppy. Exactly how you want your links. No binding at all. But also, look at that. Very little play. That's me trying to go side to side, right? You just have just this tiniest bit of side to side play. The back is a little bit more because, well, they're longer links. But yeah, you want to minimize that play as much as possible while maintaining a good amount of freedom. Yeah. So anyway, looking good, looking good. We had to take a little bit of material out of the back of our servo because this tray isn't quite long enough. So, and this is not an expensive servo, so we just dremelled out. You probably can't see it very much. Just dremelled out a little bit so that the links don't hit. That's our servo tray, because the servo tray is meant for the shorter stock length servos. And this 827 is just a little bit longer, you can see. So, but before we cleared that back of that servo out a little bit, we were kind of having a little binding and we were not dropping free. So again, just always kind of check while you're building. Yes. So we're going to see if we can get this guy pretty low. I kind of want it about right. Kind of, I don't want a full droop, right? But maybe like half droop. We want a little bit of shock in there. My only concern, like I said, is this motor. This side's plenty, right? You got plenty of drop there. Just to explain droop a little bit. Droop, some people don't fully understand droop, but droop is the amount of travel, essentially, between your car sitting at rest, or your truck sitting at rest, and when you lift it, how much of the suspension drops as you lift it, right? When you set it, so if you imagine springs in here, some shocks in here, when you set it, the shocks are going to compress a little. And if you lift it, the shocks are going to release a little. And as you lift it, the more they release, the more droop you have. So if this is like a ton of droop, right? It's full. This is full droop, technically, right? But what that does is it means a lot of people call full droop going like this, where it's fully dropped down. And the reason they call it that, I don't know if they know, but the reason it's been called that is because that means that you have no spring and you're basically fully dropped down, and then you've got full droop. When you pick up the rig, the whole thing drops all the way down. You have the full length of travel that is being compressed while it's sit from the weight of the body. So balancing your springs, at least in racing, is a big deal. It's how you set your ride height as well, for like on-road racing and off-road racing and stuff. So when it comes to crawling and rigs like this, if you were to run a half droop, basically it means your spring at full extension would be like this, right? Your shock would stop it. So you'd be like right here. And then when you set the truck down, it would compress the shock about halfway. That would be half droop, because you can lift up the truck and it'll drop the rest of the way. And you're sitting right about halfway. Does that make sense? You're like halfway between the shock when it's sitting and you have the weight of the rig. If you added a bunch of weight to the rig, it would push it down and you could end up with full droop because you're fully compressed, right? So then when you lift it up, you're fully drooping down versus only half of the travel down. And if you had really stiff springs, your truck would sit real high like this. That means you have no droop, zero droop, because when you pick your truck up, you're already fully extended, right? And full droop's not ideal. Usually your springs are too stiff. You have too much preload, stuff like that. Usually, generally speaking, you kind of want about half or less, right? Because you want to be able to let the truck kind of drop down, the axles drop down naturally, and you want it to sit low, right? Not always low, but the lower the better. That can hurt your side hilling though. When you end up with like a ton of articulation and a ton of droop, it means nothing's holding your body down to your axles. So as you're uphilling and side hilling, your body can flop around, right? Your chassis and frame will flop around. And as you're side hilling, you're going up a hill, you'll unload, right? And that weight unloading, your axle's down, but the weight of the truck will cause you to flip backwards. And that's when you end up with limiting straps and whatnot. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. Maybe we'll do a full video on that at some point. I just want to talk about it while we have the ability here. Let's get our shocks on. Alrighty, we got some shocks installed. These guys are pretty short. I believe they're only 32 millimeters. If if you go from eyelet to eyelet, you're right at 32. The total length is 38, it looks like. And you go from 32 down to like 22, it looks like. Maybe 22 and a half. So not horrible. Again, we're not looking for crazy articulation. Some people, there's other YouTubers out there that it's all they're about, just articulation. And we feel like there's a lot more to it than just getting max flex. You want stability. You want to be able to ride low and hill climb without unloading. There's a lot to it. Just having max flex is, I mean, it's not. There's a reason that people don't build real world rigs that just have crazy amounts of flex. So yeah. Anyway, we got to get one more shock on here. I'm going to show you these shocks in a minute, but I want to show you what we did here with our links. We did end up kind of grinding down this link just a little bit. Gave ourselves a little bit extra clearance there, and then we even grinded down the motor just a little bit, and that's allowed us to collapse all the way down. Okay, so now we're basically bottoming out, even so much that we were able to take a little bit off here and a little bit off the tray. So even just taking like 1/4 of a millimeter off there, 1/4 here, 1/4 there, just gives you way more clearance, right? Remember, on these little tiny rigs, millimeters equal inches, right? Like almost literally, like 1 millimeter equals an inch on a real car or real rig of the same scale, so, or the same design, you know, if you're scaling it down to 1/24. So being able to go completely flat, I definitely like that. So that's definitely bueno. So then let's go ahead and get into the shock. I'll just show you what these are about real quick. It's not really about this build, but just so you know how they work. They just basically have a spring on the inside. We added just a little bit of oil on the outside shaft to smooth them up through the O-rings or the plastic bushings here. So yeah, it comes with a bunch of different, two other weighted springs if you want to adjust the spring weight, because there's no way to do preload or pretension on these. We just turn a little collar, you tighten up the spring, and that's basically all there is to it. A little bushing pushes up on the spring, and yeah, pretty simple. I know some people will take and they'll flip the spring to the other side. That way it's forced droop. Well, it's not really droop again, but they call it forced droop, and it pulls the shock in. So you, it helps keep your rig low and not unloading. But again, the problem there is you have no actual, I guess, travel, because you're fully compressed at all times, right? You're bottomed out always. And that works on some rigs. Again, part of this hobby, part of what's awesome is what works for you may not work for somebody else. What works for them may not be your preference. So we just like to show kind of our thoughts on it. Doesn't mean we're right. Tell us your thoughts down in the comments on what you think about, you know, forced droop versus double barrel, tons of articulation, versus middle ground with like half droop, right? Or 75% droop. Again, it's also kind of, some people just like the look. And if you just like the look, go for it. I mentioned it before. It's kind of like having a totally cambered out car and you've got crazy stance on it. You know, looks cool, but doesn't perform very well. So I view flex kind of like that. You know, it can help. Camber helps a little bit, but once you get crazy with it, it's just, it's not a performance gain. It's a hindrance. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this guy together. Actually, let's just check our electronics. Since we just finished grinding the motor down, let's just make sure everything works real quick. And I want to see this light bar. So the ESC we're going to use is decased. We're probably going to end up pulling off these plugs and just putting hard wires on there. We might even take the switch off and keep it permanent on. I'm not sure yet. I think we're going to put the case or the ESC under the hood. So maybe it'd be okay to keep the on and off switch there. Be able to hit it right there with a screwdriver, maybe even my finger. So that could be cool. We usually just unplug our batteries for our power. It's a good habit to be in. You don't want to leave your batteries plugged in. Even with the switch off, it can drain lipos still, depending on the ESC. And it's just a bad habit. And if you drain a lipo to 0, you kind of ruin it. So just be aware of that. All right, anyway, this is our servo. This is our motor. And we've got a battery. Yeah, we're thinking of using these little guys down on the side. We'll see. We need to put our red JST plug on here. That's usually what we do. So we can use all of our other batteries, but we got a stock guy here, so we'll use a stock plug. Turn her on, all right. Looks good, looks good. Remote. All right, we got some motion. There we go. Well, we got go. All right, let's go ahead and let's turn this off real quick. I'm going to plug in the light. I want to see the light. So here's our light. Okay, let's turn it on. Bam! That's a bright light. I dig it though. It's pretty cool. Let's get our shock on there, and then we're going to figure out our electronic situation. Wanted to point this out as well real quick. If when you're putting your shocks in, especially up on the chassis, depending on how your shocks are shaped, they could end up kind of needing spacers, or you just need to kind of make sure you don't over tighten it. Notice how my shock will not drop down, right? Like I can move it, it moves fine, but it's not, again, super loose. So all you gotta do is just back it off just a little bit. And now we're nice and loose. See that? We don't have any extra play. It's just literally like a quarter turn, just enough to get it to be free. You want all of your joints to be free. Also, when you're going metal into metal here, if you're worried about it backing out and you don't, constantly check kind of your screws and whatnot, you can always just use a little bit of blue Loctite. Just make sure you don't get that blue Loctite on any plastic, because Loctite in general, unless it's the plastic safe version of Loctite, it will eat through plastic. I've seen people Loctite their screws into a metal servo servo tray, and the Loctite gets just a little bit on the ears of the servo, and then they become brittle and the servo just breaks on the ears. So just be aware, be careful with that stuff. All right, here we go. It's not crazy articulation. Again, we're not going for crazy articulation. We're going for performance. So I think that's going to work. And it's going to probably sit right at, it's going to be hard to see because the camera's above, but it sits pretty low, right? Like, so that's, let's see if I, there you go. That's about where it was sitting. So almost 80% dropped down, right? And then we have, well, 20% exposed, and then we can do like 80% actual droop, right? Where the axles will droop down. So that's its natural sitting. You can adjust that through putting stiffer springs in, or less stiff springs. If you want it to be fully dropped down, put the softest springs in, or if you want it to be at full extension, you put the stiffer springs in. But we like the droop about right there, right where it's at. Okay. Anyway, to the electronics. So one goal we have is to try to make the interior removable. A cool little thing of note, we pulled these screws out. Actually, let's pull them out all the way, just to make sure we're not into the chassis. But these, just take out any two of the roof screws, right? If you pull them out all the way, the roof will still stay in. Here, pull these guys out. Okay. Because of the way they designed the chassis and the bars, the cross members, they kind of just hold in, right? If you notice when you put it together, there's like a little bit of a cup that it goes into. So you can actually just kind of do this, and if you wanted to, you could leave those screws out, especially on the front here where you've got the light bar kind of pulling the chassis together, and then you can snap this in, snap that in, and your roof will stay, right? Like it's not going to pop off. I mean, I would have to really push hard, but yeah, you can do that, and then your roof, and just loosen these just a little bit so that they're not super tight. You can do that. Anyway, even without doing that, we went ahead and unscrewed the two screws underneath our hood to be able to pull out our interior. So we're going to try to do this. Basically pull it back. It's not going to be easy, I'm sure, especially with the wires, but once the wires are maybe tucked away a little better. The hard part is getting this lip. There we go. Yeah, the problem is our wires were stuck there. All right, get the lip out, right? And then we can bring this forward and just kind of push from the back on the seats and lift this up and let it kind of fold or bend. This stuff is pretty flexible. It's not like super flexible, just enough. Try to pull this out. Again, it's this part right here that's getting caught. So you got to get the other side. Let's see here. You want to bring it out evenly. Okay. And then you can just pull it out. Okay. And I think over time, this should kind of weaken up a little bit. There we go. You can do that. Just kind of weaken it up just a little bit, not too much. You can also try to sand it down. On the Ripper chassis that we built, we had this is pretty thick material, so we were able to like sand down the seats, sand down the front, and then we can slide it in and out through the front very easily. If we want to pull our battery out, Alright, so our motor's on this side, which means we want to try to put the battery on this side. This is what we're going to use. So let's go ahead and see if this guy will even fit. Oh yeah, that's going to be perfect. Well, you know what? We got to come in through the front because it's going to go underneath this tray. So we'll go ahead and drop this guy in here. I don't know if you can see that. Boom. Drop it in. Tuck our wires down, and if we have our plug, we plug it in. Tuck our wires underneath. Nice. And yeah, then we're golden. We can put our interior in. All right, so that'll work. And once the interior's, it actually fits pretty well in there. It doesn't really move around a whole lot. Once the interior's in there, it'll hold it in even better. And if we find that it's moving around a little bit, we can put a little bit of, I don't know, some sort of a material in there to kind of hold it. You know, put like the fuzzy side of Velcro. We've done that a lot to just kind of take up space and keep kind of tighten it up. But yeah, that battery will work great there. We'll link to these batteries down in the description as well. And then we're going to put our ESC up under the hood. So we're going to pull this panel off. Yeah, and I think we're just going to mount the ESC just like so. The servo plugs in the back here. And there should be plenty of room for the servo to close up and not actually touch the board. It's kind of hard to show and hold, but we can move this back a little bit. And there you go. You can see the servo's all the way compressed. We've got quite a bit of room, and there's nothing touching at all. I mean, not even close, right? We've got a good 3 or 4 millimeters. Okay, my only concern then is putting the battery in with the board kind of sticking out the back, but worst case we could also trim this tray in the back. That way it's just easier to tuck the battery down in there. Alright, so let's go ahead and get our ESC actually wired. We also need to shorten up all these cables. We got way too long of cables. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and take care of that. So I decided against rewiring these. We did shorten up our servo wire a lot. We opened up our servo, resoldered it. I've got videos on that as well. And then we're just going to wrap up our light bar wire and our motor wire. We'll tuck it all on this side of the chassis since there's nothing over there. And yeah, we're just going to, just in case we want to move this ESC for some reason, change this up to some other motor. I don't want to solder stuff, and I want to kind of keep a switch, so we're going to do that. Anyway, one thing to be aware of, since we're setting this on a flat surface, on these boards, just make sure that these pins aren't sticking up too high. Then they'll make your board very uneven. You've already got this portion right here that sticks up, but you don't want anything really sticking above that. You want to get the board as low as possible. So I trim all these little pins that stick up, because sometimes they're pretty long. You know, when it's in a case it doesn't matter, but when they're sticking out this high and you're trying to put it flat to a surface, they just kind of make it sit funny. So trim them up. When you're trimming it, be sure not to accidentally trim or chip any of these chips. Chip a chip, don't chip a chip. Make sure you don't clip any of these other, you know, solder pins or chip pins. Just be careful. I've seen somebody snip one of these and hit the chip right there, and then they're ruined. So just be careful. Anyway, we're gonna go and mount it in here now. All right. So here we have it. We've got all of our electronics in. Just double-sided servo tape, sticky tape, whatever, 3M. And the shortened up servo. We made a little adapter so we can use our red JSTs. Got our light wired. We brought it through the outside. That way we can do our interior without hitting the light wire. If we brought it on the inside, we were going to bring it on the inside, but then it makes it way harder to put the interior in. And yeah, we should be able to just slide our battery in and it'll work. Let's just test everything first before we stuff it in there. Oh, switch is already on, nice. And our light bar is working. Alright, servo, seems good. And do we have go? Oh, we do. Nice, 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 nice. All right, let's see if we can stuff this battery in. See how easy it is to get in there, and then tuck the wires, and then put the interior in. Oh, we should put the hood on. Yeah, we'll do that first. Okay, got our hood on. Should just be able to tuck this guy down in here. Nice, it clears our ESC, and it just barely touches it. And we're in. And we can Use our little extension, plug it in. Our battery wire is a little long, but whatever. Tuck our wires down, tuck our battery wire down, and our balance cable. Yeah, these battery wires are way long. Anyway, you can tuck it down in there, and we're good. Let's get the interior in. Let's see how that works. So we'll see if we can tuck this in here with our ESC and our battery cable in here now. This will be better once the panel's on. This wire will be more taut. It won't get pulled on. Okay. Should be able to push this back in. Yep. It's going. It's going. We'll lift it up from the back. Keep pushing, and it's in. Bam. Looky there. Huh. Pretty slick, gentlemen and ladies. I like it. Now the question is, what do we do back here? Do we stock tire it? Just kidding. We could do like a stock tire. Maybe we do a fuel cell. That could be cool. Yeah, that could be really cool. Like kind of a fuel cell or I don't know, something, fire extinguisher, some tools. All right, let's get our side panel on here. And we can turn it off. Look. Doot. Yeah, buddy. Got our side panels on. We're going to have to do something with the battery. It's a little loose in there. I mean, it's not too bad. It does slide around a little bit, though. Maybe we'll just put like a stop, like some sort of a bar here. We can just actually put a real long screw through, maybe through here, and it'll just come straight down onto the, like this. Right, if we put a long screw through right there, it'll bring it like that, essentially. Right, and that could, or just put a little bar, you can do like a little, get a styrene piece, and let's get some wheels and tires on this bad boy. Oh my goodness. Look at that guy. Man. How cool is that? I love the stubby look of it. With the C10, it's just kind of like a perfect wheelbase. And remember, these are +4s. These are +4 axles with these big old tires. Now, you could do it stock with smaller tires for sure, like the stock width. But we've got these big old Trail Kings on here. They're huge, and and just make it look mean, low and mean. I love it. So yeah, that's your droop, right? Droop. The amount that it drops when you lift it before you top out your shocks, I guess, versus bottom out your shocks. Anyway, pretty decent flex, articulation, whatever. I don't know. How many tires is that? Let's see. Is that 3? Can we get 3? Yeah, we can get 3. I mean, we're not coming off. 3 tires of flex. Not bad for some shorty shocks, for sure. It's a fun one. We got to get it out on the rocks. We've also still got our top unscrewed, so we can pop that up. Helps us get access into there. You can always add those screws back in. Other than that, I think it's ready to run. Ready to run. Let's turn it on. Bam. I think we'll call it Frogger. I was thinking Kermit at first, but Frogger's a little more fun. I like Frogger. Looks like a Frogger. Mind you, this is stock electronics, other than the, well, stock ESC and receiver. And it's just got a little 66T in it. Imagine if we had a micro Komodo in this. Oh, sick. All right, let's get it on the rocks. Okay, we got an easy solution. We just put a long screw in through the body panel. There it is. That's it. And the screw is just high enough to where the battery will sit and not pop up over it. It's kind of hard to see there, but you can see it down in there. And the battery doesn't move forward at all. It's got the ESC kind of there and the wires and whatnot. So the battery, it doesn't move. It's pretty tight. So that's our answer. Worst case, you could always bend the screw up, or like I said, put a piece of antenna tube or styrene or something just to widen it up and thicken it up, and it would tighten it up a little bit more to the front. You can see it moves a little bit, but I mean, not much. That's about it. So yeah, that's our answer. So something we just figured out, you can actually just take your panel and put your panel in through the side. Take it out through the side as well. So we trimmed this up a little bit to help us put it in through the front, right here and right here. But it'll actually fit right through here. Look at that. Just takes a little finesse. It's also only the second time we've stuck it in through the side. All right, let's turn her on. Bam. Let's crawl. I really miss the brushless. I need that slow crawl. I need that slow crawl. I also feel like we need some slime balls from Flub RC. These are just got foams in them, and they're just kind of sloppy. Sloppy, sloppy.
We're out of juice.
Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This little thing is awesome. The price can't be beat. You know, like I said, if you're kind of new to the hobby, or even a veteran, and you've got just a box stock SCX24, get this thing. You can just swap it straight over, as long as it's a C10 Bronco or JLU. I mean, hell, even a Deadbolt, but you have to change your front links. And you could definitely fit a Gladiator on there if you really wanted to. Be stretched out. I've seen a couple with Gladiator length links, and they look pretty mean too. So I definitely recommend some +4s if you're going to run big tires on the axles. I don't know. I like this thing a lot. It's really cool, really kind of stubby and short and aggressive. Yeah, I mean, building one with a brushless or a FearTech setup would definitely be killer. You'd kill some lines. And I'm sure you could do some other nutso stuff if you stretched it out and tried to lower it even more. You could get even lower than that probably. And yeah, well, again, we've got huge tires, so you put some smaller tires on there and it's going to look real low. We're already kind of as low as you can get. Our links are already folding upward. So, light bar is cool. I wish I had a built-in controller. But even without the built-in controller, it's cool to have light as part of the kit. That's definitely fun. The Injora axles, these +4 axles are sick with the overdrive. So you can see our silver. You should see that the front one is going to outpace the rear. See that? So that means our front's going to be pulling up over hills when it climbs. So the overdrive is awesome in these axles. I think the axles are kind of a gimme. They're definitely worth it. You know, if you're trying to build something wide and you want to deal with no scrub, see that? No scrub, right? So steering scrub we talked about. This is like the only option. There's one other company out there doing some really wide axles that I know of, and they're pretty pricey and they're never in stock. So I would just snag up some of these guys if you're looking to do the +4 on the axle. So anyway guys, why don't you, if you made it all the way to the end of the video here, why don't you put ribbit down in the comments? You need to put ribbit or put Frogger, either one, ribbit, Frogger, whichever. And make sure you guys like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell, do all those things you do at the end of a video that you enjoyed, and hopefully learn something. If you got any questions or comments about our build, definitely put them in the comments below. If you know somebody looking to pick one of these up or they're curious about it, share our video with them. Helps us out and we appreciate it. And we'll put links to all the important stuff down in the description, and so you can find that stuff. All right guys, get out there, build something awesome, crash them, smash them, and bash them, but don't break the expensive parts.